Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Spurs Up Show, the best Gamecocks podcast on the internet. Today is Tuesday, October the 13th, 2020. On today's show, former Gamecocks football player Alex McGrath joins me as he does each and every single Tuesday as we talk South Carolina's 41-7 win over the Vanderbilt Commodores, and we also look ahead to the game this Saturday as the Gamecocks host the 15th-ranked Auburn Tigers. We'll dive into both games, much more. It's all brought to you by our friends over at MyBookie. Guys, we're in peak sports season right now with all the playoffs going on, college football, NFL, all that good stuff. At MyBookie, that can only mean one thing. It is winning season. Winning season means doubling your first deposit. Winning season means free bets, super contests, Survivor, and more. At MyBookie, winning season's all about your chance to win big. Guys, like I said, you can bet anything. Major League Baseball playoffs, UFC, college football, NFL, anything and everything you can gamble on, you can do it over at MyBookie. The craziest sports time of your lifetime is here. Guys, it's simple. Make your picks, win big, collect your cash, invest in your intuition. You can select from hundreds of future bets, or you can bet games in real time with MyBookie's live betting. Put that big brain of yours to good use. Go to mybookie.ag. That's mybookie.ag. Use the promo code Gamecocks and double your first deposit. Guys, new players get to $1,000 in free play. So if you put in $1,000, they're going to match it, give you $1,000 in free play. You put in 500, they'll give you 500. It's a win-win scenario because guess what? You play that money, you lose, doesn't come out of your account, you win, you get that money again. It's a win-win for you guys. It's designed to add more excitement to the sports you love and the games you bet. Thousands of cross-sports wagers, props, and parlays await. Sign up now to bet with the best and celebrate your victory. Guys, again, that is mybookie.ag, promo code Gamecocks. mybookie.ag, promo code Gamecocks. Your winning season begins today only at MyBookie. The Spurs Up Show is also presented to you by our friends over at Yardware. Yardware Signs. Yardware is a veteran-owned and operating company licensed by the University of South Carolina, selling must-have Carolina yard and wall signs. Guys, these signs are awesome. They're made out of 12-gauge laser-cut steel, and they come in both garnet and black. Football season's obviously in full swing, and the holidays, believe it or not, are right around the corner. You can order yours today at yardwaresigns.com. That's yardwaresigns.com. Guys, you go to their website, you take a look. Like I said, they have it in garnet and black. They can have them for your yard. You can put it in your house. You can put it in your man cave, your office. This is a must-have. These signs are a must-have for any Gamecock fan. I'm anxiously waiting on mine right now, actually. I'm getting one for the studio, and I can't wait to hang it up and actually show you guys, show you some pictures, videos, whatever. But for that Gamecock fan in your life, if you're not going to get it for yourself, which if you're not, you should, get it for your loved one. Get it for your friend, your uncle, your cousin, your brother, your dad, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whatever. Yardware Signs, it's a must-have for Gamecock fans. And like we said, football in full swing, but the holidays are coming up. We got Halloween after that. It's basically going to be the Christmas season. This is a great gift. It's also not going to break the bank. Only $34.95 for a sign. But, guys, these things are super, super high quality. So, again, that is our friends over at Yardware Signs. Go be sure to check them out, yardwaresigns.com. That is yardwaresigns.com. And tell them Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent you. Let's get it. The Spurs Up Show as he does each and every single Tuesday. Former Gamecocks football player Alex McGrath. He's here to help me break down South Carolina's dominating 41-7 win over the Vanderbilt Commodores. We're also going to look ahead, talk about the game against Auburn. But first things first, Alex, as always, appreciate you taking the time, my man. How was your weekend?
It was a good weekend. Spent a lot of time indoors because Greenville, unfortunately, had about the same weather as Nashville did. So just
it rained here too. It was a nasty weekend. It was a very nasty weekend.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, and it was the thing I hated, it was warm too. So like you walked outside, I was just like, it was the muggiest, just nasty, sticky. But what they say in the South is sticky out. It's sticky out.
It is
sticky weather.
We had that nice weather a couple of weeks ago, and then I just knew in the back of my head, second summer is going to be coming here any day now. And then of course now it's in the 80s again, and here we are.
For sure. Well, let's go ahead and dive into it, Alex. South Carolina gets the big win, 41-7, gets their first win on the season. I'll ask you, because I'm sure you saw my clip at halftime. Gamecocks started sluggishly, 10-0 lead at half, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, God. Like, I mean, the worst thoughts are going through my head. I really didn't think Vanderbilt could move the football in South Carolina. I mean, I talked all week going in the game, and I said on Friday when I gave my prediction, you look at the roster, who scares you on Vanderbilt's roster? I mean, they have nobody. And I'm not trying to take away from the win or anything, but I think we can all agree they're the worst team in the SEC by far. They've got to be one of the worst Power 5 teams in the country. I don't think they win a game. But I'll ask you, I'm just curious, what were your thoughts at the half? Because, again, we can laugh about it now. Gamecocks pull away. They score 31 points in the second half. But was there any feelings of uneasiness from your side at the half?
I'll say this. It was no, because it just didn't look like anybody on their team really wanted to be there.
Right.
Look, I don't blame them. If you're not very good and it's just pouring rain outside, like, why would you want to be standing there?
I'll ask you on that note, did that game have a weird vibe to you? Like,
it did.
It had like I was like, and I said this in the halftime update that I gave. I was like, this is what 2 0-2 teams at noon in the rain, like, this is what you would expect. Like, I had somebody comment, they said it feels like a high school game. And I was like, not necessarily the talent on the field, but just like the vibe of it. Like, it was almost like a game you had to get yourself up for it. Like, you had to wake yourself
100%.
Up almost.
100%. And I don't know how much of that is, 2 0-2 teams sitting there. Also, it's just pouring rain outside. Right. And then 2, like, there's no fans, so there's no energy.
Yeah, there were literally zero fans because Vandy's not letting anybody in, I think, except students. But it's like, dude, nobody wants to go to their games anyways. So
no. And so I didn't go into halftime feeling like, oh God, we're in for a roller coaster here. Right. I just thought it was going to be just kind of a sloppy grind to the end because, even though we were up 10-0, Vandy made some ill-advised plays, I thought, in the first half. They missed the field goal, going for it on 4th down, those types of, like, kind of inside the 5 that just didn't work to their favor. So, you look at that 10-0 score and you're like, well, it could be a little bit different. Let's see how they play in the second half. And then I have no idea what they said at halftime, but that was a completely different South Carolina squad out there in the second half.
Yeah, I'll ask you because we're going to dive into specifics, but I want to ask you just as far as a blanket statement because, I thought someone that called into my show, it was one of the listener voicemails on Monday's show. They put it beautifully. They said, you know what? It's Vanderbilt. We all understand, but I'm going to appreciate this win. And that's really how I looked at it. Again, there were a lot of people on social media, oh, it's Vandy. Oh, and I totally agree to an extent, but at the same time, anytime you go on the road and you really just impose your will and you dominate an SEC opponent, it's something to pat yourself on the back and feel good about, at least for a little bit. And I mean, how many times have we seen a South Carolina team that was supposed to dominate or we thought was going to dominate or thought going to win the game and they didn't do it, right? So, I mean, you appreciate the win. You understand it was 2 0-2 teams. You understand it was Vanderbilt. You understand what the task was at hand. And it only gets tougher from here because I talked about you really needed to use that game against Vandy to get some confidence and build some momentum because now, Alex, this is your stretch. You got Auburn at home, at LSU, Texas A&M at home, and then at Ole Miss. 4 straight West opponents that all 4 are going to be very, very tricky games for sure. But I'll ask you, because I said, how much did we really learn from Saturday's game, I guess? But I'll ask you, overall, 41-7 win. Was there anything you saw on Saturday that you learned about this football team that maybe you didn't know coming in? Or was it all kind of just things you already knew that you were just reassured about from that win against Vandy?
Well, I mean, there's certainly something I think we all can take away from this is that the way we started the season as running back by committee, that has been put to bed. So Kevin Harris is definitely the go-to guy from now on. But as far as learning anything, no. I mean, and like I said, I mean, like it's for confidence reasons, that's awesome that we were able to just beat down a conference opponent like that. At the same time, it was just like we were just imposing our will in the second half, just kind of scoring in, whatever ways we wanted to. To your point, with the next 4 opponents coming up, that's not going to be the case.
Right.
So more than anything else, I've talked to several buddies about this, just, looking at the like Alabama Ole Miss game from this weekend and just, they're just running up and down the field on each other. This is important from an execution standpoint because what you didn't have this year was a full spring practice, probably a full fall practice, and you didn't get to play, Coastal to warm up with, or you didn't get to play Charleston
Carolina.
Southern to warm East Carolina, any of those teams to warm up against. So, from an execution standpoint, and getting reps, that's incredibly important to build that confidence that that you've executed this play more than once successfully now. And so now you've kind of got that in the back of your mind as you go into these what are ostensibly more difficult contests.
Yeah, I think you made a good point. We'll get into specifics. We'll talk Gamecocks running game because you rushed for 289 yards. That was the difference. I really thought, they ran the football in the first half. Don't get me wrong, but I thought in the second half you really saw us commit to the run, say, hey, we're just going to bully Vanderbilt at this point. Like, we're going to give Kevin Harris the football. I agree with you 110%. He is RB1. There's no question in my mind. And I talked to Monday's show. My biggest takeaway, Alex, from the game, and the one thing I learned, my biggest takeaway is this offense needs to run through Kevin Harris. He as good as Shi Smith is, and Collin Hill's been solid. I think the running game is so important. It needs to all go through Kevin Harris. He is a legitimate number one back. Is he as good as Marshawn Lloyd would have been? I don't know, because I said that when they lost him that, how are they going to replace Marshawn Lloyd? I truly expected to be running back by committee, but he has been a really nice surprise, and I think he's truly your number one back. I'll ask you, when you look at Kevin Harris's game, obviously you were on the team with some really, really good running backs. I just had Mike Davis on the podcast a week or so ago. You played with Corey Boyd. Dacus Turman's another name nobody thinks about. I think maybe Kenny Miles was on the team when you were there.
He was.
Yeah, and I said on the show, and I said on social media, I think Kevin Harris, to me, just from what we've seen through 3 weeks, he's the best Gamecocks running back South Carolina's had since Mike Davis. Not the OG Mike Davis, the latest version of Mike Davis. But when you look at Kevin Harris's game, what are things you like, things you see? And maybe, guys, how does he compare to maybe some other guys, other Carolina backs that you've seen?
He just gets going downhill as soon as he gets the ball. So he's not somebody that's going to dance around. And I think comparing him to, those other backs you just mentioned, he's probably 25 pounds bigger.
Yeah.
Than all of them were. And I think that makes a huge difference. So, and obviously he's not to this level currently, but I mean, like, you look at him, I would compare him more to, probably Mike Davis too, or even on some respects, Marcus, just because of that size and how downhill he gets just as soon as he gets the ball.
No, for sure. I love what I'm seeing from Harris. Like, he's a guy that first contact is not going to stop him. You're going to need a convoy to get Kevin Harris down. Hey, I thought he showed the speed too on that 88-yard rushing touchdown for sure. Defensively, again, the takeaways for the defense. Again, you did what you should have done. You really stymied Vanderbilt, and you took advantage again of a bad Vanderbilt offense. Let's call it what it is. You had a true freshman quarterback. Cam Johnson's a decent receiving option for them, but they lost their top receiver and their top running back, and they have a true freshman quarterback. I think there are probably still some holes and issues in the secondary that need to be fixed. You saw the one drive in the third quarter where they really just methodically went down the field and kind of exposed your secondary. But I'll ask you, just as a whole, the Gamecocks defense, I just read a stat on Twitter. They only missed 2 tackles in the game, which very, very good improvement. But I think, again, that's what's going to happen when you go from playing the playmakers of Florida to Vanderbilt. But I'll just ask you, as a whole, Ernest Jones, Jamie Robinson were a couple of guys that were fantastic. J.C. Horn continues to do J.C. Horn things. For whatever reason, Israel McClamu didn't play in the second half. But, again, Cam Smith with a little bit of redemption at the end of the game gets his first interception. What you saw from the South Carolina defense, is there anything you saw you can really build off of? Because, again, I'm hesitant to all of a sudden say, this Gamecock defense turned the corner. I mean, it's Vandy. We knew what they had coming in. They had no offensive weapons. And, heck, to play devil's advocate, even against Vandy, there was a lot of bend but don't break in that game. A lot of it. I mean, you had to stop them 4th and goal. Vandy very well could have been leading that game at different points, or at least I think it could have been a tie game going into halftime. But your overall takeaways from what you saw from the Gamecocks defense on Saturday?
I'm kind of with you on that, to where I don't know that there's anything we necessarily learned about this defense, but from an execution standpoint, like going out there and holding an opponent, again, a conference opponent to 7 total points and only missing 2 tackles. That's something you can build off of. So I think that's the most important thing to take away from our defensive performance against Vandy.
Yeah, I think the biggest goal or at least the number one goal, in my opinion, of that game against Vandy, and Eric Kimry, I saw him talk about a little bit of it on social media. Positive momentum, building positive momentum, just having anything to feel good about. It didn't matter who the opponent was. Again, it could have been Coastal, it could have been ECU, but going out and really just beating the hell out of someone else after you had really, 2 really tough opponents the first 2 weeks, call it what it is. Again, I'm not ready to crown Tennessee or anything, but they're a high-quality opponent, no questions asked. So I think it was nice, if nothing else, for the Gamecocks to get that relief, to play somebody they were favored against, they were better than, and get that positive momentum. We're going to put that one aside because I really want to spend almost more time talking about this Auburn game that's upcoming. Alex, the way I look at this one is, and I think we may have talked about this either off air, maybe last week we mentioned it, but for every single coach, for every single program, there are games. And listen, you can justify, hey, this, and this is why the program's headed in the right direction. Oh, look at recruiting. Look at facilities. Oh, look at this, look at that. But winning, that's what gets your program going in the right direction. Winning big games, that's what gets you going in the right direction. I see that type of opportunity against Auburn this Saturday. And again, Auburn's 15th in the country ranked. I know the rankings are kind of crazy right now. I mean, North Carolina is ranked 5th, if that tells you anything. I don't think UNC is.
I just can't with that.
I don't think UNC is the 5th best team in the country, but it is what it is. You've got the 15th ranked Auburn Tigers coming to town. You haven't beaten them since 1933. You've never beat them as a member of the SEC. Heck, you were on a couple of those teams that took on Auburn, and, you guys played some close games with them. I know 05 didn't exactly go how you wanted, but 06 had them on the ropes.
Was close.
06 with Savell Newton, Jared Cook. That's, unfortunately, when people talk Jared Cook, that's the first thing they think of is him dropping that ball against Auburn. But either way, you played them really, really close in 06. And I look back at, let's say, Steve Spurrier, or heck, even look at Lou Holtz. They had wins that were sort of those quote-unquote turn-the-corner type wins, or at least showed the program was headed in a positive trajectory. I think Lou Holtz, 2000 against Georgia, that was sort of the one, okay, here we go, we got this thing rolling. Steve Spurrier, 09 against Ole Miss, and then obviously 2010 against Bama, that was the one that told you, hey, the program has turned the corner. We're on to bigger and better things. Again, I'm not saying everything will be right in the world or that this program is headed to, on that path that Steve Spurrier's teams were on, but if you're Will Muschamp and you're this program and you're a fan that wants to justify that this program is headed in the right direction, this game against Auburn just feels like one of those games, one of those opportunities to me that if you're South Carolina, you simply have to take advantage of.
I 100% agree with you. It's so tough, and we were talking about this before we got on, just to gauge where all these teams are at anyway. Mm-hmm. Because, full disclosure, the first, Georgia plays Arkansas first game of the year. They don't look great. I'm like, okay, Georgia's down. Then they whack Auburn. Yeah. And then they absolutely steamrolled Tennessee. Yeah. So apparently Georgia wasn't quite ready to crown Tennessee either. And so, you kind of take that into effect. So I'm going to compare it to, they're probably somewhere around Tennessee's level. Mm-hmm. I would guess, unless Arkansas is much better than everybody thinks they are.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think the Auburn game, the importance of it now is stressed so mightily because we talked a little bit off air that I do see Auburn as kind of like the Tennessee game 2.0 in the sense of it's a truly coin flip game. I think Tennessee was a 3.5-point favorite. Auburn right now is sitting at a 3-point favorite. Both games were in Williams-Brice. And I talked about all offseason that Tennessee was the most important game of the season, just as far as it's going to set the tone for your season. And we knew that the schedule overall is a gauntlet. I mean, it's a gauntlet for everybody, but we knew the schedule was a gauntlet. And I said before the season that, 5-5 should be the minimum expectation. If you want to sit there and justify to me that Muschamp has the program going in the right direction, you've at least got to go 5-5, 500 or better. I think that's very realistic, very reasonable. And that Tennessee was one of those swing games you had to hit that mark. Well, you didn't get that game. Now you look at Auburn, it almost takes the role of what the Tennessee game was week one in the sense of, I just don't think there will be any moral victories this weekend. And I'm not trying to set the expectations too high and and take away credit away from Auburn because they've been struggling, but certainly they've got a good football team. Bo Nix, Seth Williams on the outside, Tank Bigsby in the backfield. that defense, they lost a lot, but Auburn has talent. We know that. Gus Malzahn, Chad Morris, whatever. I just don't think, though, anything less than a win you're not going to be able to feel, because I kind of wanted to ask you, what do you want to see or what are you looking for? But I think all Carolina fans are going to be feeling the same way. This is just one. If you don't win, it's not going to be enough. You need to find a way to win this football game.
100%. There's no, you can't kind of cling to
no moral victories. There are no moral victories here.
But no, 100%. And you can't, especially given that it's year 5, you can't cling to, we almost beat Florida. We almost beat Tennessee. We almost beat Auburn. Yeah. Like that's gone now.
At some point, you have to break
year 1.
At some point, because like we said earlier, I mean, again, all the recruiting is a nice to have, and the facilities are great, and all this, you're bringing in talent, all this other stuff, but winning games, that's what shows the program's headed in the right direction. All that other stuff is nice to have, and it all leads to what is that ultimate goal, which is you got to win games. For your program to be headed in the right direction, you got to win games. And I think it's games like these, because, again, you take a look at the schedule. Auburn at home, at LSU. I know LSU's reeling. They are struggling mightily, but they still got a ton of talent, and you're at their place. You've got Texas A&M at home, who you haven't beaten in 6 tries, and they just beat Florida and look pretty damn good doing it. At Ole Miss looks more daunting by the week with Lane Kiffin, what he's doing offensively. The next week, you've got Missouri at home, which I'm not crowning Mizzou either and think they're world beaters, but hell, they just beat LSU. Then you've got Georgia, which is Georgia. And then you've got at Kentucky, a place historically you've never played well. Again, I still think 5-5 is reasonable. It's feasible. And I don't want to I don't want to set my expectations too high or anything after you beat Vanderbilt. But again, if you are going to get to that point and try to justify, again, the program's headed in the right direction, this Auburn game's as winnable as any of them you have left when you look at that schedule.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, this one, I think Missouri are probably, Old Miss is basically 11 folding chairs on defense based on what we saw this weekend. Yeah. So, we can score on them, but they're must-watch
football, though. I'll tell you what, that Bama Ole Miss game was great TV.
Awesome.
Great TV. Yeah. And Lane awesome. Kiffin's good for a laugh or two, for sure. Speaking of that, because we're talking SEC football, I want to ask you, as someone, obviously, again, that played, has been on a team, again, the numbers we're seeing offensively is just, the game's offensive now for sure, but it's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy the score. It's turned into Big 12 football in the SEC. How much of an impact does not having spring ball and having a weird fall camp? Was that something you were expecting? Is that something you're surprised by? Again, how important is camp to the development of the defense? Because, again, as somebody who's played, been in a locker room, has seen that firsthand, I'm sure you can speak to it.
So I think more than anything else, and I don't know what the protocols were, but I know there were a lot of teams that weren't doing full tackling in those situations. So you've had offenses, being able to practice without any kind of fear of being hit or clipped, anything like that, for a month, where the defense hasn't been able to practice what basically amounts to the most important thing they can do, and that's tackling people to the ground. And I think that you can see that every single Saturday and every single game that you're watching, just where it's kind of offenses running up and down the field. It's just poor tackling because you haven't been practicing it. So as the season goes on, they'll get better. But I think the other part of that too is you just kind of walked into conference games. So there wasn't that warm up against Charleston Southern, Coastal, Furman, Wofford, whoever it needs to be. That you didn't get to play that game, and all of a sudden you're stepping in there against equivalent talent that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when you were at Carolina, because you talk about those warm up games, and I guess it's funny, like, as a fan, you kind of take those for granted because you're like, oh, it's a sure win, whatever. But obviously, listening to you and other people I've talked to, those games are very important for teams. Because when you were there, you guys played Louisiana Lafayette, you played Wofford, you played Florida Atlantic. I hate to put UCF in that category because they were actually pretty decent, but you get what I'm saying. So those games are really important for the players as far as kind of getting in the groove of things.
Oh, absolutely. Because, you spend a whole month, or at least you used to before the pandemic, hitting on each other. And then you get into that game and you get to play against somebody else for once. And it's the reps, it's the experience, it's, tasting that success, that this stuff works if we do it the right way. that builds that momentum that kind of gets you into playing in conference. So not having a full slate of, or really any slate of spring practice and then a limited fall practice, I think that is contributing in a huge way to the Big 12 that has broken out in league play.
For sure. Alex, before I get you out of here, you're an offensive guy, obviously, so I want to talk Gamecocks offense with you. I want to talk specifically about the two Colorado State guys, Mike Bobo and Collin Hill, and just kind of get your thoughts through 3 games on those guys, which is, I was thinking about this yesterday, Alex, and I almost shed a tear thinking we're basically a third of the way through the season. Like, it's a 10-game schedule. Anyways, talking about Bobo and Hill, again, we're through 3 games. I think you've kind of gotten to see now and get a gauge on what this offense obviously looks like. You've played one team you were much, much better than. You've played one team that I would say you're definitely on par with them, Tennessee. And you've played one team that's, I would say, better than you, than Florida. So you've gotten to see this offense in different scenarios and kind of what they can do and what they can't do, what their limitations are, what they excel at. Your overall thoughts, you can give a grade if you want, but your overall grade on Mike Bobo as a play caller, as an offensive coordinator, because I think the Gamecocks right now are averaging like 30 points per game, which, again, it's 3 games, whatever. But I think you can definitely say with some there's been a jump on offense from last year to this year. And I think a lot of that does have to do with the steady hand of Collin Hill. And we were talking a little bit off air about my thoughts on Collin, that I think he's played beautifully through 3 games. So your overall assessment, analysis, and like I said, if you want to give a grade on Mike Bobo and Collin Hill and how this offense has performed.
So Collin Hill, I will give an A to. Like, he has exceeded expectations. He is protected the football.
Would you believe me if I told you he'd had a rushing touchdown basically at any point this season?
No.
Like a true 10 yards out rushing touchdown, not a quarterback sneak. I mean, that was wild to me.
No, there's no way. But no, he's played beautifully. He's controlled the ball. He hasn't turned it over. He's putting it in, the receiver's hands. Whether they choose to catch it or not has been one of the more exciting elements of this year's offense. But he's played incredibly well. Bobo, is obviously calling a good game. I still can't get the visual of us taking 8 minutes on a 2-minute drill. And I think I texted you about this Saturday. The fact that we ran a reverse to Dak, like after the game had been put away. And
it goes for a touchdown.
That goes for a touchdown. I'm like, we have been down by a touchdown the last 2 weeks. Well, like, where has this been?
Yeah. That's a little bit maddening. Just, in the sense of you finally get it to Kerryon Joyner, and the first time he touches the ball, he goes for a 47-yard touchdown. It's just like, what do you know?
Yeah, I know. It's just, it's really even more from and that one is really more like, why would you put that on film in that situation? Yeah. Like now,
I agree.
Now
I agree.
Got something to prep with,
because you can't really run that again. You can't really run that again. They're going to know. It's almost like we ran a trick play. Like, why?
Yeah, basically, up by 5 touchdowns. I'm like, what are we doing here? Don't get me wrong. I'm very glad that
right.
47-yard touchdown. I just wish they'd use that for Auburn instead of.
I'm genuinely hoping it leads to more touches for Kerryon Joyner, because a lot of people, I do my live streams and stuff, and people submit questions, and a lot of people ask me, is Dak going to touch the ball more? And I make it clear, like, I'm not saying get the ball to Dak Joyner 10 to 12 times a game. Like, I'm not saying he should be touching it that much, but when you have that good of an athlete just standing on the sideline, 3 or 4 touches, like, give him a chance in the Wildcat, do a jet sweep, do a reverse, throw a screen. Like, he's just too good of an athlete to not be utilizing his skill set in any way, especially like we've said, where I would still say, and this is unfortunately, I'm saying this after Vandy too, like, do you really feel confident at anybody at wide receiver other than Shi Smith, even after Vandy? Not really. I think Leggett is a decent option for sure, but there wasn't really any. The running game is what took over on Saturday. Nick Muse at tight end did have a good day, but you still kind of go into Auburn like, man, if Shi doesn't ball out at wideout, and we're not running the ball like we did against Vandy, which I think is unrealistic to expect to run that way against anybody not named Vandy, but yeah, if we got to go to somebody else other than Shi, like, I don't really know who the first guy the ball is going to is. So I'm just saying, use all of your athletes. Use all of your athletes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, use them all.
Yeah, so I mean, like I would tell you it's TBD on Bobo at this point because to your point, we're not going to be able to run the ball like we did on Vandy. So we're going to have to throw the ball on Auburn to win. And we've got to scheme that up, or we got to find guys that can catch it. Like, and this is complete ignorance on my part, and I should know this. Like, did Van didn't have any drops Saturday, did he?
Not that I can recall. Not that I can recall. I don't know how many drops we finished with. It wasn't enough to be noticeable, I guess.
Yeah.
No, I don't think he did.
Okay. Because I'm like, I haven't heard it. Like, he doesn't have any catches, though, either, does he?
I think he may have had one Saturday. But, I mean, you do realize when they released the top 6 receivers, because, they ask who's in your receiver rotation, he was not mentioned amongst the top 6. So
Good.
that's kind of the trajectory of Van's career at this point, which it's a shame because, again, we could do a whole other podcast on this 4-star prospect out of Tucker, Georgia, highlight reel high school tape, and it just hasn't translated for whatever reason. But
that's so interesting. Yeah, because I mean, like even when he came as a freshman, like he was getting. I feel like I remember him getting like good time out there, but who's to say?
Right. I'll ask you in closing. I know I keep going, but in closing, again, you played on a South Carolina team that took on Auburn under the lights Thursday night. You guys were obviously the underdog. Auburn was a really, really good team at that point. But just talk about, as a player, what the guys are feeling in the locker room right now. I know there's got to be a little extra juice this week as far, versus last week when you're 0-2, you're playing Vandy. Now you have some confidence. Now you have something to feel good about and build off of. And yes, it's a noon game, but you're at home, nationally televised. You got a ranked opponent coming into Williams-Brice, a team you'd never beaten and whatever. I'm sure the energy level at practice this week, and I'm sure, again, you can attest to it, and just the buzz around the facility is definitely turned up another notch this week.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And we were talking about this earlier too. It's just like with that, like I have. Having never played in an empty college arena,
right?
Like I have no idea how much that factors into any of this, because a lot of that energy, especially like when we played them in 2006, if you can kind of get somebody on the ropes, the crowd like being there with you, is huge, coming up behind you and keeping you jazzed up. And like if that's not there, I have no idea how that works. I'll tell you this: we need to get whoever is in charge of tickets for Texas A&M, because that's the biggest 25% crowd I think I've ever seen.
Well, hey, not to dive into this, but hey, the Florida governors are allowing them to have full stadium now. Not that UF and FSU and them are doing it, but apparently he's just saying screw it. Florida just does not give a damn, by the way. I will say that. They don't.
No, dude. It's been a lawless swamp since its inception. Like that's.
Yeah, but I will say I think 20,000 can get more raucous than people think, and I think the fans will come ready to do as much as they possibly can. But I agree with you. Whoever's coordinating the 20% at Georgia and A&M, we need to get in touch with them, because
yes, we do.
I'm like, that's the biggest 20% I've ever seen. So, Alex, always a pleasure, man. Like I said, we'll look forward to it. Obviously, it should be fun on Saturday, and we'll break it all down next week. But as always, man, a pleasure for sure. And let's hope the Cox can get the upset on Saturday, no doubt.
We'll be pulling for it.
Absolutely. He's Alex McGrath. I'm Chris Phillips. We appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll catch you next time with an episode of the Spurs Up Show.